Welcome to Cash Plays. And now your host, Bart Hanson.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Cash Plays, and I want to wish everyone in the U.S. a happy tax day. That's right, it's April 15th, and your income tax is due, so if you haven't done it, you're screwed if you haven't filed for an extension. But today we're going to get into a little bit about the taxes of poker. I'm going to talk a little bit about the perils of slow playing, and I've talked about that before on this show. And then we're going to get into the psychology of poker with a good buddy of mine, Joe McLean. Now, Joe's been playing professional poker for about 1 or 2 years now, no limit. But before he played full-time, he was a hypnotherapist. So he's got a lot of good ideas about when you should be playing, in what mindset you should be playing at the table to maximize your value. If anyone remembers from old school Live at the Bike, he was Chester on 2+2, and he was on Live at the Bike a lot. He played a lot. So looking forward to having him on the show. As always, you can email me at cashplays@pokerroad.com, and you can leave a voicemail at 877-836-ROAD, and I will be playing the first voicemail of the show later on here in the segment, so get those voicemails in. You know, I've talked about this a little bit before in some of the earlier episodes. I do a radio show over at worldseriesofpoker.com, and I think it's on 15 or 20 terrestrial radio stations, but you can listen to it as a webcast as well. And it's on Mondays and Tuesday nights from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And what we do is we tape it from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Time on Mondays, and the second hour is live. And then we use that first hour as the hour of the show on Tuesday. So if you want to call in and talk with me, you know, not necessarily about a specific hand, but we can talk strategy, we can talk anything. It's kind of a light show. I do it with a good buddy of mine, Nick Gieber. Check that out, worldseriesofpoker.com. Click on radio, and if you want to call in, you can do it during that time frame on Monday nights from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And the phone number is 866-925-TALK. 866-925-TALK. And I'd love to hear from you guys. So, you know, get the phone calls in over there. And again, it's just kind of a light show. You know, it's called World Series of Poker. We talk tournaments. We'll talk whatever you want. On another note, too, anybody that might be interested in sponsoring Cash Plays, Poker Road has a couple sponsors for some of the other shows, Poker Road Radio, Big Poker Sundays. I'm not sure if Two Jacks is sponsored yet, but, you know, probably a target audience would be, you know, if a training site wanted to advertise or anything. You can just contact me again at cashplays at pokerroad.com, and we will talk about it. So I want to get into a little discussion about taxes now, since it is tax day. And I've had the great thrill of being a victim of identity theft. I have a really, really good gambling tax accountant. His name's Russ Fox. If everyone's ever been on legislative forums in, you know, different websites, his name is rolled around. He knows a lot about it, specializes in gambling. And we were going to e-file this year, so he sent me some signature documents in the mail for me to sign. I signed them and I mailed them back to him, and then, you know, he's going to e-file. So he sends them to me, I sign them, California and federal, and I send it back to him through certified mail, and they never get there. And he emailed me when I was in Foxwoods a couple weeks ago, and he said, I never got your signature documents. And I was like, oh, that's odd. So I resent them at the business center there, and he received them, and he went to e-file. Well, my California return was accepted, but my federal return was rejected. And the error message that I got, or that he saw that I got, was you can only file one return per Social Security number. So pretty good chance that somebody intercepted those signature documents out of the mail and used my Social Security number to what we think is file for a refund. And the way that, you know, your federal return can work is that you can do a direct deposit. So that person wouldn't even have a check sent to me or sent to them in my name. They could, you know, give the feds an accounting a routing and a checking account number and have a direct deposit of the refund. And it's happened a lot. And luckily, I caught it and put a fraud alert on my credit report, filed the police report with the West Hollywood Police. So hopefully nothing will happen. But just my luck, like being one-outed on the river, so watch out for that. But I do want to talk about the perils of uninformed accountants, because I've run across a few. You know, if you're not really familiar with the way that gambling law works in this country, you've got to go to an accountant that understands how to file your wins and your losses. And I've seen it so many times when recreational players will go to an accountant and they'll think that they know what they're doing, but they really don't. If you are not filing as a professional gambler and you're not paying self-employment tax, you are supposed to file all of your wins and itemize your losses as deductions. And it's unfortunate because if you do that and say you're a single guy like me, you lose your standard deduction because you have to itemize. So, you know, say I was a net $40,000 winner one year. Well, if I'm playing 5-10 no limit, I'm supposed to be filing something like, say I play 30 hours a week, $250,000 in winnings and offset them with an itemized $210,000 in losses. And I just know so many people that don't do it that way. Now, if you're filing as a professional, you're subject to 15% self-employment tax, and you can write off business expenses like meals and travel. But if you're not filing as a professional, you cannot write those things off, and you have to file it as gross wins and gross losses. And the biggest thing I came across was when I was a prop at the bike. When I was a prop at the bike, most people did not file as professional gamblers because you'd get a W-2 and you'd get a paycheck. So you'd have taxes taken out. But they weren't filing any wins or any losses. You know, if the IRS ever looked into the definition of their job, even if they were net losers, they're playing 40 hours a week. Say I was playing 20-40 Hold'em. They should have hundreds of thousands of dollars in wins and losses. That is the proper way that you file as a non-professional in this country. So I want everybody to keep that in mind, you know, if you're doing the right thing and filing correctly. Offset your wins with your losses. And, you know, you go to these tax people and they say, oh, you don't have to claim it, or we'll just net. If you lost, we'll just net. Well, folks, that's not how it works. And again, you know, if you want to go to a skilled gambling accountant, his name is Russ Fox. He's active on the 2+2 forum, and he's great for that type of stuff. So keep that in mind. Again, I just see so many people that are totally clueless as to how to file taxes and tax returns. So on that note, I'm going to move on here. And I talked a little bit about this, I think, on an early episode of Cash Game Corner on Poker Road Radio. And there was a couple hands that I played against a certain villain that are going to bring up some concepts. And the first one I want to get into is checking a good but non-nut hand on the river to thin value bettors. And when you're playing deep live, you never really want to overplay your hand. But if a guy will value bet very, very thin on the river, then there's nothing wrong with checking and calling the river, because you don't lose the value because the guy's not going to check behind. It's a rather simple concept. I'll talk about a hand I played a couple of nights ago. It was limped around. The effective stacks were $3,000. Limped around three ways. We were playing 5-10, no limit at the bike. And I had pocket threes. I was either under the gun or in the big blind. The board came out Jack 9-3 rainbow. Well, I let out for 30. This guy who's a smart lag, the smart loose aggressive player, called. And we were heads up. So I've got bottom set, rainbow board. A little bit of connected up, you know, connectivity with Jack 9. Turn comes the deuce of clubs. It brings a backdoor flush draw on the turn. Now there's two clubs. I lead out for 75. He raises me to 275. Now, in my earlier days, I probably would throw in a 3-bet there. And I think when you're shorter, I think you can throw in a 3-bet. But I know that this guy has a possibility that he could have limped in with jacks or nines. I want to play a little bit of pot control. I also think that there's a possibility he could be raising me on the come with a draw, But he also could be playing that move where he raises with a hand like King Jack and he's going to take a free showdown. And that's what I was thinking in my head. Well, let's say he's got Ace Jack or King Jack and he's going to take a showdown at the end. Do I lose some value if I just call and check the river? So I was thinking about, well, I can call here and bet the river. But again, normally, and it's the same thing with online as I've dabbled a little bit now in No Limit Hold'em online. If you throw a bet out, or if a guy from early position bets the turn, and you raise him, and he now calls, and he now leads the river, it's extreme strength. It's almost never a bluff. So I was thinking that I wasn't probably going to take that line. When he raised me, I said, "You're not going to just check it down at the end, are you?" And he was like, "No, no, no." So I'm thinking to myself, again, twofold. A little bit of pot control here. And I'm not concerned with him checking behind with a 2-pair plus hand. I even think the guy might think he might make a thin value bet with Ace Jack. He probably shouldn't because I'm probably calling with more than Ace Jack there on the turn. But if he slow played a hand like Jack 9, he's going to bet the river. If he runs into 2-pair at the end, he's going to bet the river. Or if he's raising on the com and he misses, he's going to bet the river as a bluff. There's also the possibility, I was thinking, draws that he might raise on the com with a 9 with clubs, also Queen 10. So I kind of wanted to see a non-clubbed river. And if I saw a non-clubbed river, I was going to check and call. If I saw a clubbed river, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. Well, the river came the 10 of clubs. So in retrospect, I wonder if I should have come out and blocked the river and then folded to a raise knowing that he made clubs. But I was thinking there was a possibility that he might have popped it up on the turn with a hand like Jack 10 and then he was going to bet the river. I didn't think I was going to lose so much value if he checked behind with a hand like Ace Jack or King Jack. You know, and I can come out and bet the river, but he really should not call with Ace Jack or King Jack when I take that line. So I wanted him to also bet some bluffs at the end. And again, if I come out and bet the river and he's got 2-pair, he's going to call. Well, it's the same thing with me betting or checking and calling. I know he's going to bet 2-pair plus. And again, I can pick him off some bluffs. I checked to him. The pot was $650, and he bet $450. And at this point, I really didn't like it because I really thought he might have made clubs at the end. But I called, and he's like, "Yeah, you probably got me." He had Queen 10. So again, taking that type of line is not bad against a guy that can bet bluffs on the river. Really what you want to see is a guy that will bet thin and who can bluff. It's kind of a little pot control play there with bottom set, but I don't think I lose that much value with the hand as well. Now, if you're playing against a guy that doesn't bet the river thin and doesn't bluff, then I would play that hand differently. But it's definitely, you know, an interesting concept that you're not losing a lot of value with a very good hand that you have, but a non-nut hand that you don't want to overinflate the pot with. But you know a guy will make a very, very thin value bet at the end. So he's basically betting your hand for value on the river. And you make the same amount of money, and it's a way to control pot size. So that's an interesting concept right there. Now, I had a hand that I just played tonight against this same guy. Again, he's a smart, laggy player. And this is talking about the perils of slow playing. And also specifically to slow playing bottom set. You know, I talked a lot in a previous episode about negative equity slow play. And I think with bottom set, it's another example where, you know, say you've got a set of threes and the board comes out Jack 10-3 or Jack 8-3. Let's say it's not that connected. And you decide to check it. It gets checked around, you decide to check it. Well, now the turn's a 5. Well, a guy with pocket 5s was not going to give you any action on the flop if you bet. And he was not going to give you any action unless he hit his 2-outer on the turn. And now he's hit his 2-outer. And now you're going to lose some money. Now, I'll give you an example, or I will tell you the hand that I played here tonight. And it's going to get pretty heavy at the end, so kind of brace yourselves, because I'm going to talk about structured hand analysis and pot odds. but there are some very important concepts, so bear with me. We had effective stacks of $2,100, and we were actually playing five-handed. And a guy that plays pretty weak tied opened in mid-position for 40. And this is in the 5-10 game at the bike, and I called with pocket deuces. Got folded around in the big blind, and he overcalled pre-flop. So the pot's about $120. Again, effective stacks of $2,100. The board comes out 8-7 deuce with two clubs. It gets checked to the pre-flop raiser. He checks it over to me. Now, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to bet that flop. But I knew that the pre-flop raiser didn't have anything because he had just given up on the hand. And again, the guy in the blind is somewhat laggy. So I thought he could come out and bet the turn, regardless of what came, and I was going to raise him. Again, the board is draw heavy, and this isn't something that I always do, but I thought the situation warranted it, and now I really regret doing it. So I checked behind. The turn was the 3 of hearts. Now the smart lag leads out for 150, a slight overbet of the pot. The pre-flop raiser folds, 8-7 deuce 3 with two clubs. I make it 400. He says, "What, are you crazy? I'm all in." All in. He's all in. 920 in the pot. He moves in for 1,700 more. Now, a lot of people are thinking who play no limit on online 6-max. Oh, snap call. Well, this is different. Remember, it's live. Live games tend to be loose passive, and the hand ranges are much more polarized. The first thing I said to him, I said, "You wouldn't do that with a draw, would you?" Remember, the board's 8-7 deuce with two clubs on the flop, turns at 3. So I'm trying to think, would he ever do this with a flush draw, straight draw? He said, "No, I would never do that with a draw," and I believed him. I really read him that he thought he had the best hand, and he was extremely strong on the turn. So the pot is laying me 2,600 to 1,700. I'm getting about 1.5 to 1. Now, what are the hands that I beat that he thinks he's really, really strong? And this guy is smart. He's a good player. He would never play an overpair like this. Not with this line. I mean, that would be ridiculous. Suicide. I lose to a set of 8s, a set of 7s, and now a set of 3s. And I was thinking, the hands that I beat here, or the hand that I beat, is 8-7. So I'm putting him on 4 hands, 3 of which I am losing to, and 1 of which I beat. So, if you look at hand combinations, and I did this out on a piece of paper, if I specifically put him on 7-8 or a set, there are 9 combinations of hands that contain 2 pair within it. There are also 9 combinations of sets that he could hold. So, all things being equal, it would be 50-50 if you were just doing hand combinations. But again, this is a structured hand analysis issue. I really did not think that he would overplay 8-7 here. 1.5 to 1 in the pot, which basically means I need to be ahead more than 40% of the time with his hand range. And that is what the pot equation is, 1.5 to 1. So, does he have 8-7 here less than 60% of the time? Does he have a set? Or excuse me, yeah, does he have 8-7 here less than 60% of the time? Or excuse me, more than 60% of the time. Sorry, I screwed that up. If he has a set in this spot, I'm basically crushed. I'm going to make the numbers easy. I'm going to say that if he has a higher set than me, 3s, 7s, and 8s, I'm basically, my equity is 0. I know it's not, but I'm just trying to make things simple. I'm also going to say if he has 8-7, my equity is 100%, even though it's not. He's got high single-digit equity. If he's got 8-7, he's got 4 outs to the river. But he has to have one of those 3 sets less than 60% of the time for me to make this call. And I just didn't think that he would overplay his hand that way. I thought it would just be a huge mistake with effective stacks this deep with these blind sizes. Because what if I had checked behind the board with pocket threes? I mean, that's a hand he doesn't beat. He doesn't beat deuces. And again, I'm making this equation easy. I'm taking a draw out of the equation, the calculation. I really didn't think he had a draw. So he, I've got to be ahead here more than 40% of the time. And I just didn't think that I was with the line that he took. Bet 150, I make it 400. He snap ships, and he is strong. Again, I lose to a set of 8s, 7s, and 3s. I tanked, studied him, thought he was super strong, and I folded, and I showed him deuces. And I don't like to show my big laydowns, but I wanted to see what he had. And he showed me 7-8. That's exactly what he had. And I could not believe how badly he overplayed that hand. It's almost a classic zero play where he ships there. He's never going to get called by a hand that he beats. Now, he could blow me off of a two-way draw, but normally I'm going to bet a draw on that board. If I had a two-way draw, I'm going to bet that flop if it gets checked to me. And a lot of the time, most of the time, if not, maybe it should have been all the time, he never gets a weaker hand to fold. Now, in this case, I did fold. Or, excuse me, he never gets a stronger hand to fold. Now, in this case, I did fold the deuces. But this is me. I'm Bart the Nit. And I read the guy as being super strong. If I had got a set of 3s in that spot, I'm probably going to make that call because I beat a set of deuces. Now, in retrospect, it really irritates me because if I had bet the flop like I probably should do with this line bottom set or my proper line, we're going to get it all in. There's no way I'm going to go anywhere. He's going to check raise me. I'm going to 3-bet him. And if he badly overplayed 8-7 on the turn when he can't beat a set of 3s now, he's going to badly overplay 8-7 on the flop. So I really should have had an additional, $2,100. Instead, I fold and I lose the pot. But I made a pretty bad fold of a set on the flop a couple months ago at Commerce where I just didn't read their situation right. And I had middle set on a flop, on a non-draw heavy flop. And a guy played his hand super fast. And, going into the hand, I thought, oh, this is a great spot where I'm going to flop set over set. And I folded middle set. In a retrospect, it was a terrible fold. But in this case, with structured hand analysis, I just don't think it's a bad fold. I think this guy has got me crushed more than 60% of the time. He really, really should. And again, it's player dependent. And I asked a lot of other guys that are familiar with him, and they all said that they would have folded as well. It just happened to be here. He thought he was stronger than he actually was and ended up blowing me off of the best hand. But I want to get into a little bit of discussion of pot odds because a lot of people don't calculate pot odds correctly. Again, I said I was getting 1.5 to 1 in the hand. So that means that I'm 60-40. I need to have 40% equity in the hand to make the call. And again, with structured hand analysis, I didn't think so. When you have a flush draw on the flop, and you get it in, and let's say you don't think your overcards are good, you're about 35% to hit the flush drop. So you're about a 2-to-1 dog. Got about 35% equity if the guy doesn't have a set and you don't have overcards. So the pot needs to lay you 2-to-1. And that's pretty simple. A lot of people know that. But I see this mistake made a lot. Now, there's a simple way to calculate your percentage of equity with your outs. On the flop, take your outs and multiply by 4. So if you have a flush draw and you've got 9 outs, it's approximately 35%, approximately 1 chance in 3, which is 2-to-1. And this is where people go wrong. On the river, you can multiply your outs by 2, and that's your equity. So let's say you have a flush draw still on the river. Well, you've got 9 outs times 2. Let's call that approximately 20%. Now, people make the mistake and they say, oh, well, I got 1 chance in 5. I need 5-to-1. No, you need 4-to-1. Whatever your chance in, you have to subtract 1 to find your proper odds. If anyone's familiar with roulette, say you put a bet on a single square. Well, you've got one chance in 36 to hit. So they pay you 35-1. And it's actually not one chance in 36 because of the 2 zeros. It's actually one chance in 38, but that's how the house, makes their edge. But again, all things being equal, one square out of 36. So the odds that they will pay you are 35-1. If you bet on red or black, you have one chance in 2. So the odds that they pay you are 1-1. So let's go over something simple here. And again, let's say you've got a flush draw and a gut shot. And again, we're going to take sets and stuff out of the equation because it changes with redraws and stuff. Flush draw and a gut shot on the turn. You've got 9 outs and 3 offsuit gut shot outs. You've got 12 outs. Simple calculation, multiply by 2, your equity is approximately 25%. So what are the odds that you need to make the call without implied odds? Well, it's one chance in 4. 25 goes into 100. One chance in 4. 3-1. The other thing that I sometimes use is 45 unseen cards. On the turn, you've got 12 outs. 12 goes into 45, approximately. 3 or so times, or 3.5 times. So you need about 2.5 to 1. You're dividing the amount of outs you have by unseen cards, unseen cards by the amount of outs that you have. 12 goes into 48. Again, it's a little less, but we're rounding up. I'm making a generalization. 12 goes into 48 4 times. One chance in 4, 3-1. That's what you need to chase a flush draw and a gut shot. Again, without implied odds and all that stuff. But I just see people make that mistake. I see people say, "Oh, I've got a flush draw. I need 3-1 because my equity is 33%." No, if you've got 33% equity, then the other guy's got 66% equity. You need 2-1. Same thing if you've got 25% equity. You need 3-1. In my case, if you're 60-40, you need 1.5 to 1. Other examples of sometimes when you might run into 60-40, say a guy shows you that he's got queens and you've got ace king and you're all in pre-flop. That's about 57-43. Again, you kind of round that up to 60-40. You need 1.5 to 1 to call. Nothing's perfect, and you're never going to see the other guy's cards. You always have to put them on a range of hands. But that's basically how you do the equation with the odds. Now, again, simply put, because I was getting 1.5 to 1, I only need to be good with my set 40% of the time. If he had made a huge overshove, where he had stuck 10,000 into the pot and there was only 920 dead money, I basically am only getting 1-1. So I need to be good closer to 50% of the time. That's sometimes the power, and sometimes I see people make bad laydowns on the turn. If you've got an open-ended straight draw with a flush draw, you have 15 outs. With 45 unseen cards, that's one chance in 3. Which means in true odds, the pot only needs to lay you 2-1. Forget about the implied odds. And here's the thing. If a guy makes a pot size bet, just a pot size bet, you're always getting 2-1 and no limit. If someone is always making bets pot size or below, you are always getting 2-1. And that's why those 15 out draws are so powerful and why you can semi-bluff with them a lot too. Or you can just call. You're almost always getting the right price. And that's why on the flip side of that, I'm a big proponent of if you have a big hand like a top set on the turn, you think the guy's got a big draw, try to price him out. The stronger your hand, the more that you should bet because the more willing you are going to be to call the river if the draw comes in. So if the pot's 600 and you've got 1,000 left in your stack and you're convinced the guy's on a draw, ship it in. Because if you bet 600 into a $600 pot, he's going to get 2-1. The pot has 1,200 in it and he only needs to call 600 to win 1,200. And again, I hope I explained that. I know it's a little bit heavy, but I see people use the odds kind of, wrongly a lot of the time. And I'm not too upset about that laydown because I think more than 60% of the time I should be beat there with that line. And it just happens to be this guy overplayed his hand. So, it's Harrington, structured hand analysis. It's just one of those things. But if you want to take your game to the next level, you've got to start putting people on hand ranges, figuring out your equity, and using odds correctly. So moving on from there, we're going to get to Joe in a couple minutes here, but I want to play a voicemail as we end this segment. So here it is.
Hey, what's up, y'all? This voicemail is for Cash Plays. I just listened to that conversation with Simolius. Man, that was awesome. I've been feeling like my game's been getting a lot better lately, playing a lot, reading a lot, kind of putting it all together, and it was so cool to just hear him saying, like, all the things that I've been kind of thinking past few months. I got a couple questions for Bart. One's about the interview. I was thinking about what he said is, like, his one thing that he has absolutely no exceptions, that you shouldn't make a play without knowing how you'd respond to a raise. And I was just thinking about, like, what he was talking about how complicated deep stack play is, and, like, if you're in a multi-way pot with a bunch of different stack sizes, do you really think that you just absolutely have to know how you'd respond?
Thank you very, very much for that question. Unfortunately, that guy did not identify himself. But again, if you want to leave voicemails, 877-836-ROAD. And to get to that point, what Neiman was saying, Simolius, it's a great point, and I'm guilty of it sometimes too, where sometimes I'll play more on feel, where I'll make a bet and not know what I'm going to do if a guy raises me. And what I've really started to do is start to think it out in my head like a chess match, where I have a counter plan if a guy makes a raise or if a guy makes a check raise. So I think that you do need to start thinking streets ahead, just like you think moves ahead in chess. So if I'm going to bet this much and this guy makes a raise, what am I going to do? Because part of that should go into your bet sizing. You don't want to overcommit yourself where if the guy makes a check raise, now all of a sudden you're pot stuck. So you've got to be thinking through those types of situations. And it will never hurt to think, streets ahead. And I think it's something that I'm going to be adding to my game, and I'm really trying to add to my game. And all of you out there, should incorporate that into your play, what to do on future streets. Thank you very, very much for that voicemail. And that's going to end our first segment. We are going to take a little break, and we will be back with Joe McLean and talk a little bit about the psychology of poker right here on Cash Plays.
Cash Plays. Previously on Poker Road Radio.
Imagine getting Alan Kessler to do a negative EV bet. But he did it. He did it. So
he did it with me in Chinese.
So now he's rolling the dice, and Lane and I decided to bet the don't.
They didn't decide to just bet the don't. Brutal. They decided to load up, okay? They were firing like 800 on the don't, and it was the don't come bar. So as Alan's rolling numbers, they're placing it. The 5, he hits the 6, he hits the 9.
No lie, Alan got a spread out. He hit every number and then rolled a 7 before his play.
Don't miss a moment. Tune in to Poker Road Radio and get all the action from the tournament circuit. Cash Plays.
And we're back with Cash Plays. One other thing before we get to the psychology of poker I wanted to talk about. That radio show that I do over at worldseriesofpoker.com, you can actually listen to previous shows. Everything's archived, and it's pretty easy. There's a link. So again, we're on Mondays and Tuesday nights for 1 hour, 9 to 10 Eastern, and you can call in on Mondays from 8 to 10 Eastern and talk with Nick and I. So, definitely check that out. Today's guest is a good buddy of mine, and we are going to talk about the psychology of poker. Anybody who is an old school Live at the Bike fan knows him. He used to play on the show a lot. He's Joe McLean, and he was Chester on 2+2. So, Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You kind of have a little bit of a tough act to follow in Simolius and Francie the last couple weeks.
Yes, indeed.
But we're going to not talk about really heavy poker strategy. We're going to talk about mindset and the psychology of poker. I want to give everybody a little bit about a background of you. You know, I remember you coming on Live at the Bike maybe 2.5 years ago, playing in the 300 to 500 game of the Bike, which was a 5-5 blind game. But you used to be a hypnotherapist, right?
Well, I still am a hypnotherapist, yes.
I mean full-time, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not currently practicing full-time.
So tell us a little bit about, what you did there. You basically would put people in trance.
Well, I mean, I had an office in Burbank, and I saw clients, and I helped them with all kinds of issues, emotional issues, smoking, weight loss, that type of thing.
Right. And, obviously poker's a big-time mental game. So how did you... how do you use some of those tools now that you play full time? Well,
I'm using them all the time, and that's what I'm here to talk about, is dealing and working with your own emotions and how important it is. And, we were talking, off the show about how the games have gotten tougher, since the peak of the poker boom. The economy is not the same. There's not as much free money out there as there once was. Not only that, thanks to shows like your show and Card Runners and all that other stuff, people are getting much better. And so you're not playing some real estate guy with a bunch of money. You're playing some 21-year-old kid that decided he doesn't want to be an engineering student anymore and he wants to play poker.
One of the things too, talking about mental states that I've noticed is that it was almost like back in 2005, early 2005, and even 2006, end of 2004 being usually when the first live no limit games were spread, that you could really play on autopilot. It was so easy that a lot of times you could overcome what now is probably a serious emotional leak, right?
Well, the thing is that there was a lot of gifts out there. People were giving away their money so much that you could play bad, you could tilt off a bunch of money, you could make a lot of mistakes, and in an hour or two, somebody would give you the money back. And I don't think that's the case in general right now, especially in LA.
You actually just came from. You're from Los Gatos, California. That's where your parents live sometimes, right? Half the year.
The mean streets of Los Gatos, California.
Yeah, the mean streets of Los Gatos. And you actually were just recently playing at Lucky Chances. Now, Lucky Chances is a card room up in the Bay Area where I think it was Gabe Thaler got his start and some other very, very good poker players. So I know you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Well, I hadn't actually played up there before, and so I wanted to just go check it out, see what it was like. And it's in Colma, which is like San Bruno, South San Francisco. And the casino's up on this little hill next to a cemetery. It's kind of nice. But, I can't give it a really great rating. The staff and the dealers were all very good, professional and kind to me. So I got to give them props for that. But the place, compared to a lot of places you can play poker, it was kind of run down. The tables were old. They don't have the shuffling machines. And it really needed it nearly needed to be spruced up a bit.
I had heard that it was interesting. Like they used to play pot limit or a no limit game back in the day, but I heard that is that not allowed up there now, and it's a spread limit, or am I confusing that with something else?
Well, in the city of San Jose, like at Bay 101 and at Garden City, for some reason they don't allow no limit hold'em. And I think it's the city that does it.
The actual act of big betting is not allowed.
I guess so. So they have these spread limit games.
Okay.
Now, the reason I went and played at Lucky Chances is they do have no limit games there. No limit hold'em there. On Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, they have their bigger game, and I think it's like 10, 10, 20, 40 to open. Uncapped. Okay, but I was there on a Tuesday. I was playing a smaller game, and the blinds are $2, $3, and $5.
Okay.
$10 to open. Okay.
So you can't just limp in. You're opening for double what the blind is, what the third blind is.
Right. It's kind of like a 5-10 game, except there's only $10 in blinds.
Okay. Yeah.
But, the first $2 are on the button.
Okay.
And then small blind is $3 and big blind is $5.
But the button is last to act, though.
Right.
Yeah.
But what's kind of unique, I haven't played this game before, you can straddle from any other position for $10.
Right, which is sometimes called the Mississippi.
Right. And there they call it a kill. They call it a kill there. And so for $10 you can do that straddle or kill, and it passes you all the way on the first round back to you. Okay? Mm-hmm. But if anybody else wants to come in on that pot, they have to open for at least 20.
Right.
And you have to put in 10 more or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a pretty good thing to do if you're like in the cutoff or the hijack spot. I think there's an advantage there.
One of the I get a lot of emails regarding straddling and people talking about the EV of straddling. And, I think that if you have the option to Mississippi straddle from any position, then straddling can definitely be a plus EV move in late position on the button. I think they might have been allowing it at the Rio last year. I know some places do it. From up front and under the gun position, I don't do it. I know I've seen you play. You don't really do it. I don't think it's overall positive EV. It is supposed to get like action from the game. And, if you're going to straddle and never raise out of the straddle from under the gun, then there's really no point in straddling. But at the same time, it's a catch-22 because do you want to be raising in the worst position on the table with like a garbage hand? You straddled a 10 or 20 in a 5-10 game, and 5 people limp in, and you've got ace-4 suited. Well, that's a hand that you're actually supposed to raise there because you're supposed to be raising your range,
right.
A certain percentage of the time. Do you really want to make it, 120 in that spot and get 4 callers with ace-4? It's an interesting thing. But anyways, we're not, like I said, we're not going to get into the brass heavy tacks of poker strategy here. I was watching because we brought you on to talk a little psychology,
right?
I was watching the Masters over the weekend, and somebody actually, one of the announcers, used the term emotional management, and there's always a nice little parallel between professional golf and professional poker. One of the parallels I make is how golf is so much better off because in their tournaments they don't have to put up their money. It's all sponsorship, and whereas poker, it's all the players' money. But to be a professional golfer, you have to obviously be physically talented, just like in poker. You have to be able to be talented to play the game, but you have to be very even-keeled and strong emotionally. And people use the term bankroll management in poker a lot, but let's talk about emotional management a little bit and what it takes to be an overall consistent winner.
Well, I think emotional management is a really good term. A lot of people say, okay, if you want to be a good poker player, you have to have great emotional control. Emotional control. I don't like that word because it's like, wrestling a grizzly bear. It's I don't recommend it. So what you can do is you can break it down into 2 basic steps. And the first is emotional monitoring and then emotional management. First, you've got to really become aware of your triggers, what upsets you, what tilts you, what is it that frustrates you, and always be aware of how you're feeling. Now, I'm going to say a statement here that's not 100% true, but if you assume it to be true, when you play poker, you're probably going to be much better off. And that is, if you're feeling good, you're playing good, and if you're feeling bad, you're playing bad. Okay? Because the unpleasant emotions that come up, frustration, all that, we'll go over them. When you're playing poker, the deeper you are feeling bad, okay, the less you're able to gather the proper information that's around you and process it. Your brain just is not working to capacity. Your critical thinking is not working to capacity. And also, the more emotional you are, especially negative, the more impulsive you are. Okay? The more apt you are to dump off a bunch of money.
Or just to let emotions cloud what might be the best decision, right?
Exactly. In other words, you may be feeling bad, but you're like, okay, I've got emotional control. I'm going to fold this hand, okay? But if you were in a better mental state, an emotional state, you might have realized that guy gave off a big tell and he was bluffing. And you could have raised him off of it. But you didn't because you just weren't feeling good enough to be accurate in your read.
And that's interesting because Joe Seabach and I got into a little debate on one of the episodes of Poker Road Radio. We were talking about, and we're going to bring this word up, tilt, and I want to ask you, what is tilt?
Yeah.
But we were talking about how some people tilt in different ways, and I tend to be a weak, tight tilter, which is what Phil Hellmuth tends to be. And he was like, well, that's not really tilting, but it really is, right? Normally, tilt is found with guys that kind of end up being hyper-aggressive and blow their chips off.
Right.
But I've noticed that, like you said, sometimes I might not play a hand that I should, or I might not. I might fold the hand, and I might not notice the elements that I would have noticed if I was in a better emotional state, and that ends up me, mucking the best hand or just not making the overall best decision.
Right, because you're not, gathering and processing information as well as you could, basically. Now, there's like steaming and then there's tilt. Okay, steaming is like frustration, anger, impatience, and antagonism. Okay, you're angry. Okay, and that, obviously, feeling those emotions.
There you go.
Don't worry, we'll edit all that out. Okay, so like impatient, antagonism, hostility, anger. That's steaming. Okay, that's frustration, and you're gonna play bad when you're feeling that way. Tilt, to me, is when you've been beaten up so bad that it looks like you're, looking out of a fishbowl, out to the outside world. You're beaten, and you notice that you're raising under the gun with Jack 6 offsuit, just on your own. You notice when you're really tilting, you start to just doing things on your own because your prefrontal cortex or whatever your brain just isn't really in control. It's pretty much mammal brain and reptilian brain going. You're in a trance.
Well, let's talk about what is, you've actually told me about that tilt is a form of trance before.
Yeah.
What is trance, and how does tilt relate to that? Let's talk a little bit about that.
One definition of trance is the more you are focused on what's going on inside your own mind and your own emotions, the more of a trance that you're in. The less you are aware of the exterior world. Okay? So when you're alert and you're awake, you are observing and you are reacting a lot to what's going on in the exterior world. The more in trance you are, the more internal your stimuli is and what you're dealing with, okay? And that's why, you notice when you're really tilting that you're betting and raising and your arms are doing it by themselves, basically. You're just on autopilot. And and that's what we're going to get to in a minute, what I consider cash game poker's, one of the most potent and underused weapons in cash poker is the ability to get up from the table, Which, of course, you don't have the luxury of doing in tournament poker. Right. You don't have the luxury of doing it in tournament poker, and I don't know if you have the luxury of doing it in any other game or sport or competition. I mean, you can take time out for a minute.
Right.
But you've got to be able to get up from the table when you're not feeling well. You've got to get up from the table. And the great thing about cash poker is you can get up for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, a day, a week, or a month.
Now, typically, in typical trance and typical tilt spells, and again, it's probably different for every person. Can some people get up for 10 minutes and get off of tilt?
Yeah, and I'm going to we'll go over in a minute some tips, basically, on what you can do once you get up. But the first thing is, when you notice that you're really upset, this alarm has just got to go off in your head. Get up from the table now, get up from the table now, get up from the table now. And you've got to heed it, because when you need to get up from the table the most is probably the most difficult time mentally and emotionally for you to do so. Because you're like, I got to get the money back now, or I'm mad, or this or that. So that's when you really need to get up. And it's an amazing weapon, because what you're trying to do, you talk about positive EV plays, right? And strategy, okay? And what's great about this show is it helps people become a better player, okay? Especially, the last couple of guests you've had on there, they're amazing. Okay, what using emotional management can do is help you play your best. Okay? And you've got to be able to play your best, as much as you can. And so what you can do is think about it as time as sort of like an EV. In other words, you want to be playing positive EV hours. Okay? You think about it like in terms of table selection too. Any hour that you're playing in a bad game, you can consider it a negative EV hour. Okay? Any hour that you're playing when you're not feeling well is a negative EV hour.
And you could be in a good game, but if you're not playing well, it's still a negative EV hour.
Yeah, I've been in several good games late at night, but I wasn't good anymore. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of part of the game too. So
you were a spot.
Yeah, not totally. But it doesn't matter if you're the best player in the world. If you're not playing your best, it's costing you money.
Right.
Okay, and so you want to put in positive EV hours as far as your emotions. 30 good hours is better than 30 good hours plus 10 bad hours.
And we see it all the time too. I see it at the bike. I see it at Commerce, where a guy will play for 2 days straight. And that normally comes about because he has been stuck early on in his session. So not only is he actually might be down when he was actually putting in the good hours. Say he put in 6 hours and then he lost a big pot. He was up and now he lost after 6 hours.
Right.
But now when he goes on a 36-hour bender, the next 30 hours are bad hours, right? Right.
And, people do make their money back playing bad. I mean, you can do it. But, it's like one of my favorite Dirty Harry sayings is, a man's got to know his limitations. Maybe you are good at playing for 24 hours. Mm-hmm. Maybe you're not. You've got to know for yourself.
One of the things I want to talk to you about, and, I wondered if I was missing out a little bit, because the way that my mind works when I play at a table, and I spoke a little bit about this last week, I never picked up the bad habit of playing when I'm stuck and trying to get my money back. I'm actually the exact opposite in the sense of if I lose early on in a session and I'm down, usually I have a stop loss of a buy-in and a half or so, maybe 2 buy-ins. If you see me down 2 buy-ins, I'm always leaving right away, even if the game is good. And, even if that happens in a short period of time, like 1 to 2 hours, I'm out of there. Now, going kind of by your theory, if I'm not going to play good hours after that, then I guess that's the right move for me to make?
I think it's smart.
Okay.
I do it too because I notice, I generally buy in not super short, but fairly short.
Uh-huh.
I'm changing that a little bit, but a couple of buy-ins, when you buy in a fairly short like me, when you lose a big hand, you're probably getting stacked. It's probably getting all in. Mm-hmm. You're getting it all in and you win or you lose. So I do that myself. I've left after an hour, getting stacked twice. And I've noticed that I'm still angry for maybe an hour more after I get home.
Uh-huh.
Okay? And it's fine. It's okay to tilt at home. That's where you want to be mad, is away from the table. Think about it this way. If you are only playing when you are 90% to 100% sharp, okay? And you're playing against guys who are ranging from like 30% to 100%, that's a tremendous advantage. And, I talk about how easy it is to get it from the table, but you notice not too many people do it. And it's a big edge.
Here's a strategy that one of my good friends used too. We talked about how when you're really deep, you have a big advantage over other players that don't play that deep. That's what Simoleus talked about and Francie talked about the last couple episodes. So this guy, he's a very, very good player, but he likes to play deep when he's winning. So what he does is he buys in for 100 big blinds. In the 10-20 game at Commerce, he'll buy in for 2,500 just so that he doesn't have to keep adding money onto the table.
Right.
And he plays an aggressive short to medium stack. And when he gets deep, now he sits back and relaxes. He plays nitty, but his state of mind is good because he's up. Now, he could drop his first buy-in, and theoretically he might be down 2 buy-ins, but usually if he's up at 5,000 or 6,000 and up over 250 big blinds, that means that he's at least even, if not winning, usually winning. So when he's deep, he makes better decisions. He's never really deep when he's stuck a lot.
Right, that's smart.
Yeah, and that's an interesting, it's not something that I necessarily do because I don't think that my negative emotions affect me in such a bad way where I'm going to steam off money when I'm deep. Now, again, I might, kind of be a weak tight tilter, but this is just a way to combat that, kind of buying in short so that when you do get deep, you're up when you're playing deep. Now, if everybody's a robot, you always can cover the table or whatever your bankroll allows for, and that's the biggest advantage. But if you do feel that you've got some emotional leaks, and we all do. Nobody's, except I guess if we were Chip Reese, who was supposedly like, he was just unaffected. Then maybe that's a strategy for some people to think about. Buying in on the medium stack and then being up when you play deep.
Well, what you don't want to happen, obviously, is to play well all month and then to get stuck and then to tilt it all off in one day, right?
Right.
That's just a disaster. And that there's that player, one of the players at Commerce, who's really good. He usually chews up the 10-20 game, and he can beat it for 6 months. And then I hear that he goes up to the 20-40, and he can lose it all in a 36-hour session.
Well, I've actually seen it with players too, and there's a player at the Bike that plays pretty well for 29 out of 30 days, beats the game pretty well, but one day out of the month, he might lose the entire amount of money that he's won that month, and he'll start drinking, and it's really something. So it's almost like those negative EV hours are severely crippling, almost to the fact where it overcomes they overcome the positive EV hours that he puts in.
Oh yeah, well there are players who could make a living playing poker that aren't and won't because of their emotions. Period.
Now let's talk about some specific emotions, and I know you want to go over some concepts here.
Well, you want the best emotions to be playing with, to be having are, being cheerful, enthusiastic, calm, and focused, or detached. The next best is like neutral, okay? And the first tip I'm going to give you, I usually do this on the button, but it's probably more effective to do this on the big blind, is every time that you come up to the big blind, you do an emotions check, and you say, where am I at? Am I cheerful, enthusiastic, or whatever? If I'm not, okay. Am I just a little frustrated? Okay. Now I can get myself back in line. I'm okay. Okay, but if I'm really upset, then, you've got your big blind in your hand. Don't take the big blind. Get up. Okay? Just get up. It's okay. You don't have to control your emotions. You just don't want to be mad at the table. And in cash games, that's just an incredible thing you can do. You can't do it in tournaments. You can't do it anywhere else.
And it's interesting because even if you're slightly upset, if you get up, a round playing 9-handed is about 15 or 20 minutes, which might give you enough. It's a nice little set period where you might be able to get back into check.
Oh, sure, definitely, all the time. That's all that it takes usually is 5 to 10 minutes, unless you're really, really upset. But just take a walk around the casino, and in a bit I'm going to go over a specific technique. But you can use the big blind or the button as just an anchor to remind you, okay, how am I feeling? Okay? Because remember, if you're not monitoring your emotions, 8 other people at the table are. When you lose a couple of big hands, all the good players are watching you and to see how you're playing, and they're making adjustments. And if you're steaming and stuck at the table, you're not making adjustments.
I mean, how often do we talk about in a hand, and Greenstein was big on this, was the guy stuck? When you talk about a hand and you talk about, what should I have done in this situation, and in No Limit, the situation is always player dependent. One of the big factors is, well, what was he steaming? Was he losing?
Right.
Did he lose a pot right before this?
Exactly, and the good players are always taking that into consideration. And if you're stuck in steaming, they know it. And if you're stuck in steaming and you're playing, then you're not observing as well. You're not sharp. You're making mistakes. And obviously, in No Limit Hold'em or the big No Limit or Pot Limit games, it's huge money. So after neutral, you start getting into bored. Bored starts to get negative. Okay? Bored, impatient, antagonistic, hostile, feeling pain, anger, resentment, anxiety, fear. Actually, technically, all the negative emotions are probably based on fear of one or the other. But, numbness, which is tilt, that type of thing. When you start really getting into those emotions, you are definitely playing bad.
So the fact that if you can identify these types of emotions or any of those types of emotions, that's when you think you might need to leave the table, right?
Yeah,
even for a short period of time.
Exactly. You may not need to leave the table, but you need to monitor your emotions and check on them, okay? You've got to notice. You've got to be aware. If you're in the middle of anger and you're not aware that you're angry, then you're in trouble. Once you're aware, then you can go, okay, let's just get back to neutral or whatever. And if you can't, then get up from the table.
So if you're getting up from the table, or if you decide, I guess this is twofold. Let's say you're feeling some of these emotions, and you're either staying at the table because you think you can handle them, or if you get up from the table because you want to manage them, how do you go about dealing with these feelings?
Okay, that's a great question, and that's the one process that I'm going to go over today. And basically, the first couple of times you practice this, it's probably best to sit down, okay? But once you get used to it, you can do it, anywhere, when you're walking, driving, at any time. Okay, first you have to notice that when you're experiencing, unpleasant, negative emotions or whatever, there are thoughts going through your head. Okay, I should have done this, stupid dealer, that donkey, whatever it is going through your head. Okay, there are thoughts that are going through your head. Okay, and then you're experiencing the emotion, and the other part of that is the physical sensations in your body. Okay, like the fear response. When you're experiencing fear, you've got that weak feeling in the stomach, maybe tightness in the chest. Your other muscles might be tight, that type of thing. So what you do is you stop focusing on the thoughts for a minute and just focus your awareness on your body. Okay, and the sensations you're feeling in your body. And don't resist it. Just allow it. Just be there with it. Okay? And if you don't deny it and if you don't resist it and you just focus on the sensations of your body, within a few minutes they begin to dissipate.
Focus, just, you mean trying to focus on containing them or focusing on the physical feeling that they're giving you?
Yeah, what you're doing is you're just focusing your awareness on noticing how you feel. Okay?
Instead of like letting how you feel judge your actions, now you're actually trying to just think about the way that you feel. Is that basically?
You actually just how your body feels.
Okay.
What you notice in your body. In other words, you get up from the table, you're upset. Okay, you go, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to focus on how my body feels. Mm-hmm. Okay, my chest is tight. Okay, my stomach feels icky, right? And you just be there with it. You don't resist. You don't deny it. But what that does is it takes you off thinking about your thoughts, so you're not continually just staying upset, and just your awareness, bringing it to your body, okay, and breathing and allowing it, okay, those feelings begin to subside, and it only takes a few minutes. Within 5 minutes, you can be feeling much better, okay? Very often, that's all it takes.
Do you recommend doing that at the table if you get good at it, or is it always something that you probably should be doing away from the table just because, can you do that and concentrate like you should be at the game?
Well, especially at the beginning, you should do it away from the table. Mm-hmm. And you can do it at home. This is something you can do for fear, anything. Whenever you're mad about anything, when you have the chance to just sit there and be with the sensations in your body, okay? And it's really very effective. It's very simple, but it's really effective. And over time, you'll find that certain things don't trigger you in the same way as before. It actually increases your emotional immunity to getting upset, okay?
Right.
So I recommend that you do it away from the table. However, if you're just a little frustrated or whatever at the table and you're used to doing it, you can do it for 30 seconds, in between hands. That's fine too.
One of the things I never understood, and I think you said because I remember I told you about this before and you were like, well, that's because you're an EV robot, Bart. But I never understood people getting upset about bad beats. The way that I get upset is when I make a bad play, when I don't extract maximum value in a hand, make a bad laydown, make a bad call. But, if I've got 80% equity against a guy, like I get it in with aces versus kings for $4,000, and the guy happens to win. Now, maybe this is just me, but I know that I'm going to win that hand, 1 out of every 5 times.
Right.
Or 1 out of every 4 times. So that doesn't upset me. Because I know over the long term, the EV will take over, and I'm putting myself in a spot where I'm winning money.
Right, but if it's the end of a 2-week bad run,
right? Yeah.
what people tend to feel is a little bit victimized. You feel like a victim, and that's no way to play. But it's natural. I'm as big a sinner as anybody. Mm-hmm. I have to be very vigilant with my emotions at all times. I was saying, Bart is kind of Rain Man-like in certain ways, which it's a burden to his friends, but it helps. It helps with his poker game. Okay, for the rest of us, we really gotta be alert, and just think about it. Feeling good, playing good; feeling bad, playing bad. There's a couple other things you can do to make it easier. Drink a lot of water and coffee at the table, and then you always have to take breaks. Get a piece of chocolate or whatever.
That's interesting because if you drink a lot of liquids, you're going to have to pass them out, right?
Right.
It's very. I didn't even think about that.
In other words, one of the things that I try to do is I try to take a break about every 2 hours.
Okay.
Okay. Mm-hmm. You don't have to turn into one of those guys that's gone from the table half the hour all the time. You don't have to turn that. But I try to take a break every 2 hours. If I take a bad beat or a tough beat, I get up. Okay. And then that recycles. So then I'll take my next break 2 hours from that.
Okay.
From that time. I'm trying to think of his name. Anyway, one of the old tournament players was saying that every time he takes a bad beat in a cash game, he walks around the casino. Take a walk, take a deep breath.
Which is where you can be focusing, like you said, that technique of trying to actually focus on how you physically feel, right?
Right. I think it's funny because I think smokers have a big advantage because they're always having to get up and go smoke.
Really?
And that allows them to cool off.
Uh-huh.
So you could, take up smoking.
Oh, that's a great idea. I know
that for your game, Bart.
I know that you are a big proponent of some types of nutritional things that help you, like a green tea. You're starting to get into eating dark chocolate and stuff, high in antioxidants, right?
Right. Well, there's some stuff. There's like polyphenols or whatever in dark chocolate that does help your critical thinking temporarily. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I just like green tea because it's healthy.
Yeah.
But, some people, you have to this is such an individualized thing. Mm-hmm. Some people can't play well if they're hungry. Other people can play for 24 hours straight well. But if they got in an argument with their girlfriend before they came to the casino, they're going to dump off 10 grand. So everything is individual. And that's why you got to monitor for yourself. And, poker, cash game poker, you have to be just brutally honest with yourself to win consistently.
Talking about food and stuff, thank God that I eat healthy at the casino, because if I didn't, I would be a blimp. I mean, I'm not the skinniest guy in the world anyways. But at least in my own personal experience, I find that eating light meals while playing just keeps you mentally sharper, as opposed to a guy that's, eating a cheeseburger patty melt with mayonnaise and French fries. Just heavy food, don't you? Do you find that it makes you mentally sluggish? I find that it does.
Well, they say because of all the energy and blood that goes into your stomach during digestion, mm-hmm. that it's going to make you a little bit more tired and sluggish and not as sharp. So as I said, if it doesn't bother you, then don't worry about it. But if you notice, just get into the habit of noticing how you're feeling. Mm-hmm. And once you notice it, once you monitor it, then it's easy to make a shift or make a decision. Our emotions come up naturally. Okay? That's why you don't want to control them necessarily, because you can get into the thing, well, I shouldn't have been angry, and get upset with yourself for being angry. Well, that's stupid.
Right.
I got angry, then what did I do about it? Okay? I was smart enough to get off from the table. Like, you saw, the Aussie Millions cash game?
I've seen a couple episodes of it, yeah.
And you saw the hand where Antonius pushed all in with pocket eights against Ivy.
Right.
Okay.
And there was an overcard out there, right?
There's like a queen out there.
Yeah.
Okay. What was going on was, the first time I watched it, I didn't notice it so much, but I think Ivy was already tilting a bit. He mm-hmm. was pushing hands. If you watch some of the previous hands, he was playing bad hands and pushing them. And sometimes it's easy to go, well, it's Ivy, he knows what he's doing, and just forget that he's able to tilt.
That he's human.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and then that Croc guy, who wasn't in the hand, was talking throughout the hand, and he was behaving really terribly. Okay? So Ivy finally does the right decision, and he mucks. Okay? But Phil Ivey, one of the best players in the world, in front of cameras, in front of millions of people, got up and left the table. Not because he was stacked, but because he was smart enough to leave. And if Phil Ivey can do that when there's TV cameras around, then you can do it at the bike, and you can do it at home when you're playing online.
And, a very, very good move. That story reminds me of Brian Townsend, SB Rugby, writing in his blog, I think it was last summer or maybe the summer before at the World Series when they were playing a ridiculously big PLO game at the Bellagio or something, where he bluffed off like $300,000 to Bobby Baldwin when Bobby Baldwin had the nuts.
Yeah.
And he got up. He used that tool that you were talking about, and he got up. And, probably saved him some, what's an hour of play worth in, 300, 600 PLO?
I can't even imagine.
An hour of bad play. But, I'm glad you came on the show, Joe, and it's a little bit unfortunate that, these issues aren't discussed more because, we're discussing them in about a half an hour here. But some of the great players say, and I think it's true, that this part of poker is almost as important, if not more important, than the actual play, especially at the top levels. Because if everybody at the top levels is just about the same in terms of talent, then this element is actually what wins and loses money over the long term, right?
Well, when you get up from the table and take a break, or you leave, or you don't come back until you're feeling good, you're denying them of your tilt, basically.
Right.
It's like a quarterback twists his ankle or whatever, in the fourth quarter. Well, now you can stop the fourth quarter, take a month off, rehabilitate, and come back for the next play.
Just the emotional state in general. I mean, again, if you put a group of players with just about the same good talent level, then it's probably going to be the one that can manage their emotions the best that's going to be the overall winner, right?
Of course, all things being equal. Definitely.
Yeah.
And the great thing about this is most people don't do it.
Right.
Most of your opponents aren't going to do it. So it's a double advantage. You've got them when they're tilting, but they don't have an access to your stack when you're tilting. And it's just huge. For some people, it's worth thousands or even millions of dollars a year.
Right. Well, Joe, I appreciate you coming on the show, and hopefully maybe we can have you on again at some point. If you have something else to bring to the table, I'm not sure. No, I'm
not sure about that. But I want to thank you, Bart, and all the guys at Poker Road for having me on the show, and I hope that I was able to be of some assistance to the guys out there listening.
I think you definitely were. And that's going to wrap things up for us this week.
Oh, one more thing?
Sure.
I want to say hi to Kevin Krantz, who's that I met at Lucky Chances. He was like the only guy that ever recognized me from Live at the Bike.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I went to play Lucky Chances, the only place I can play where nobody knows me. And I'm there for an hour, and the guy's all, hey, you played on Live at the Bike. So now he's your newest fan. So hi, Kevin.
There you go. So, again, we're going to wrap things up here for this week. Join us next week. And keep those emails coming at cashplays@pokerroad.com. Send out a voicemail. I know I played a voicemail today. So 877-836-ROAD. And check out that radio show that I do over there with Nick Keeber, WorldSeriesOfPoker.com, 866-925-TALK. And again, if you want to sponsor the show, contact me. So for Joe McLean, I'm Bart Hanson, and we will see you next week.